Hello, welcome to the second section of our course. We just finished the first section of the course and took our test. Now we will begin on the second, which covers propositional logic. In this section, in this lecture, I will give you an overview of our class. I will introduce you to propositional logic, and we'll cover why study propositional logic. Here's an overview of our class. First, we covered introduction to reasoning. You learned what an argument is and such. You learned the counterexample method. Now we're going into our section on propositional logic. The main point of this whole section on propositional logic is to find a method to prove whether a given deductive argument is valid or invalid. To find a method and to use that method to prove whether a given deductive argument is valid or invalid. In the third section of the course, we'll cover induction, and I'll give you analogical arguments and moral arguments as an example. And finally, we'll cover informal fallacy. What are these fallacies? Well, a fallacy is an error in reasoning, and an informal fallacy is an error in reasoning that doesn't have to do with the structure of the argument. So attacking the person rather than the person's argument is a fallacy. It's an informal fallacy. So if someone comes up to you and they make a claim like the earth is round, if you say, well, why should I believe you? You're such a bad person. You've attacked the person rather than their claim. So rationally what you should do is not attack the person, but you should examine the claim itself. And of course, we all know that the earth is round. So it shows the foolishness of attack against the person. The earth being round has nothing to do with whether or not this person is bad, whether this is a bad person or untrustworthy. So we'll get into that later. For now, we'll study propositional logic. And in our first section of the course, we learned what a statement is and how to distinguish statements from non-statements. We learned that arguments are made up of statements. We learned what an argument is. We've learned how to identify an argument in ordinary language and how to identify the parts of an argument. We've also learned how to distinguish arguments from non-arguments, such as explanations. We've learned the difference between deductive and inductive arguments and the various properties for each, such as validity and soundness, strength and cogency. We've learned a method for proving that an invalid argument is in fact invalid. That was the counterexample method. And now we're going to learn a method for telling whether a deductive argument is valid or invalid. This will take about 4 weeks. By the end of the 4 weeks, you'll have taken the test. So, introduction to propositional logic. Propositional logic is a branch of logic that studies ways of combining or altering statements or propositions to form more complicated statements or propositions. Now, we've learned what a statement is, and we're going to take the word statement as equivalent to proposition. So, when I say propositional logic, just think of it in terms of statement logic. And that definition is from the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy. So, what's an example of combining? Suppose that Obama is president, which is no longer true, but suppose he's a president, and suppose Obama lives in the White House. You have those two statements. You combine them with the word and you get Obama is president and Obama lives in the White House. So that would be combining. You're taking two different statements and squishing them together with a connecting phrase. How about altering? You could take the statement Obama is president, and you can alter it to Obama is not president. So you're taking a statement, you're adding something to it, which alters the statement. Now, the word not will be a very common way of altering a statement that we'll see in propositional logic. Okay, propositional logic also studies the logical relationships and properties that are derived from these methods of combining or altering statements. That's, again, the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy. So you can ask, is the statement Obama is president and Obama lives in the White House a consistent statement? Namely, can it be true both that Obama is president and that Obama lives in the White House? And we see, of course. But some statements are not consistent, like the bottom one, Obama is president and Obama is not president. Those are not consistent. They can't both be true at the same time, in the same way, etc. We ask, is Obama is president and Obama is not president self-contradictory? The answer is yes. Now, we will not study the logical relationships and properties of statements. We will go directly from learning how to construct statements in propositional logic to using our method to show whether or not an argument is valid. And the method is the truth table method. So we'll learn how to form statements in propositional logic, and then we'll learn the truth table method. Now, the main components of propositional logic are propositions, that is, statements, and logical connectives, such as and, or, and if-then. So you'll take statements and combine them with other statements using and, or, if-then. Or you'll alter them using not. That's basically propositional logic, but we're going to learn a language in which we can write propositional logic statements. So here's one thing you should know. Propositional logic does not study the logic of parts of statements. So John is a bachelor, and John is a bachelor is a statement. We won't decompose that statement into simpler units. So we won't decompose John as a bachelor into John and being a bachelor. We won't study the logical relationship between the subject and the predicate. We're just going to study the relationship between full premises, full statements, premises, and the conclusion. We won't break down the premises into their parts. Okay, so why study propositional logic? Great question. I'm glad you asked. 1, it reduces vagueness in everyday language. It reduces vagueness in everyday language. So consider this statement. John and Mary or Rita are going to the party. John and Mary or Rita are going to the party. All right, that's vague because are we saying John and Mary are going to the party or Rita is going to the party? Or are we saying John is going to the party and Mary or Rita is going to the party? We don't know. That statement is vague. If you put it into propositional logic, you can eliminate the vagueness so that you know precisely what you're saying. It also helps with precision in your thinking. Once you're able to see the way that you can combine and alter statements and the way that one statement is related to another, it's really going to help you be clear in your thinking. For example, when we were talking about the vagueness in everyday language, if you didn't immediately notice the vagueness, well, studying propositional logic might help you notice the vagueness. And it'll help you to reduce the vagueness. And propositional logic helps you focus on form. The form of what? Arguments. When we studied validity in the first section, we saw that a valid argument is this: a deductive argument in which it is impossible for the premises to be true and the conclusion to be false. It's impossible for the premises to be true and the conclusion to be false. And that has to do with the form of the argument. It actually really doesn't have to do with whether or not the premises are true. That is soundness. Soundness is validity plus truth. Validity has to do with the form of the argument. The form of the argument is such that if the premises are true, the conclusion must be true. So here's an example. All bachelors are male. John is a bachelor, therefore John is a male. Given the form of that argument, if the premises are true, the conclusion must be true. There's no way around it. So when we put things into propositional logic, it'll help us see that we're actually just dealing with the form of an argument. We're actually dealing with the form of the argument and not any of its content, like being a bachelor, John, being a male, that kind of thing. We're going to get rid of all of that. We're just going to focus on the form. And the main reason for us to study propositional logic is to come up with the method, namely the truth table method, for showing whether a given deductive argument is valid or invalid. Validity is an important concept in our course. You gotta understand validity. You gotta understand validity. And I think that doing truth tables will help us understand validity. Thank you. I'll see you in the next lecture.